Good evening, everyone. I'm Archit Seshadri. Thanks so much for watching Gravitas. Tonight is Sunday, March the 19th. You're watching Gravitas on WION, the only Indian channel that brings you a global perspective where we dissect all the top stories from South Asia and around the world. But first, let's take a look at the headlines trending this hour. Germany rejects Donald Trump's allegations that the country owes money to NATO and the United States for defense protection. And U.S. and China's relationship reaches a new level after North Korea tests a rocket engine. This after Rex Tillerson meets with Chinese leaders. We'll get to those stories shortly, but the big discussion all about U.S.'s relationship between China as well as Germany after key meetings taking place within the Trump administration. Well, despite a long list of potential pitfalls, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's visit to China, well, it passed off smoothly, unlike Trump and Angela Merkel's meeting in Washington just a few days back, which was a little bit more awkward. This is going to be our first discussion tonight on Gravitas, U.S. and Germany's relationship. This after that meeting in Washington, D.C. Trump made some comments this weekend saying that Germany needs to pay up and pay back NATO as well as the United States for defense protection that were provided. To discuss this story, we're joined by former diplomat Shiv Shankar Mukherjee here in the studio in New Delhi. Thanks so much for joining us. We also have American writer and former intelligence officer Glenn Carl from Boston. Thank you so much for joining us as well on the discussion. We appreciate your time. We know it's early there Sunday morning, right before brunch, but we'll keep this conversation fast-moving and interactive. But first, let's get you the story and bring you the perspective. Germany's defense minister has now rejected U.S. President Donald Trump's allegations that Germany owes money to NATO and the United States for defense protection. The defense minister on Sunday said there is no debt account at NATO. She also added that defense spending goes to UN peacekeeping missions to fight European missions, as well as to fight terrorism, groups like ISIS. She also said that everyone needs to share that burden fairly. Well, earlier this weekend, Trump tweeted after meeting with Angela Merkel in Washington that Germany owes vast amounts of money. Trump also urged Germany and other NATO countries to meet NATO's defense spending targets, and that Germany's defense spending will rise from around 2 billion euros to more than 40 billion by next year. And during the trip to Washington, Merkel reiterated that Germany is committed to the 2% military spending goal. So let's first talk about that. Let me bring in Glenn Carl to talk about this. Glenn, you know, we always see Trump making comments with regards to connections. That meeting with Merkel, how do we think that went? I mean, was that a positive move between U.S. and Germany? And now these comments that have come about with the money that, you know, Germany allegedly owes to NATO and the United States. What do you think about that?
Well, the United States still is the 800-pound gorilla, as the expression goes. So countries, allies, and adversaries of the United States have to deal with the U.S. I think it is a dangerous move for any leader to have a meeting with Donald Trump, because he will invariably say and do things and manipulate his interlocutors in a way that will make himself appear stronger to his base, and that's it. I don't think the meeting went particularly well. Some of the commentary was that it was, on the whole, a moderate success, except for a few awkward moments. I actually don't see any substantive positives that came out of it, because Trump's understanding of the role of NATO and the obligations of its members is essentially that of the drunk on the end of the bar stool. Germany doesn't owe the United States money. There are obligations each NATO member has to reach a threshold of 2% of its GNP spending on defense, and only 5 of the 28 have met that. So in that sense, Trump is correct that member states need to increase their spending to meet their agreed obligation. But that's it. Germany does not owe money, and the money goes to Germany's and NATO's collective defense, not to the United States.
All right, let me bring in Shiv Shankar Mukherjee to get your thoughts on this. You know, we know Trump makes a lot of statements. He makes a lot of bold statements. Some of them are controversial. He often makes them on Twitter. He had a meeting with Merkel just a few days back, and then this coming on Twitter talking about Germany needs to owe money to NATO and the United States for protecting when it comes to defense. I mean, where do we think U.S. and Germany's relationship will continue after this meet? It certainly was a awkward / interesting meet, right?
Well, I agree with Glenn that it's dangerous to have a meeting for a foreign head of government to have a meeting with Donald Trump because of what he might do and say. In fact, not just a meeting, but even a telephone conversation might be dangerous, as the Australian Prime Minister found out. Having said that, I think the meeting with Angela Merkel was actually frosty and not even a moderate success. I would in fact not use the word success at all. You know, usually, and I've had lots of experiences of this, even if there is very contentious conversation when they are having their talks,
right?
You usually have a spin put on it in the joint press statement. Given the fact that President Trump is, you know, statements range even in public and on Twitter from wild allegations to very strong statements to outright falsehoods. Even given that, you could make out from the press conference that there were very strong differences in approach in terms of the whole concept of the European Union, because he never used the word European Union. For Angela Merkel, the European Union is an article of faith. For Germany, it is one of the fundamental underpinnings of their very existence in Europe and in the world. And she mentioned her attachment to the concept of the European Union and how important it was. You know, it even ended up with Mr. Trump refusing to even shake hands at the end. And of course, his strong statement on, if I come to the question of the military budget, the agreement is for each European country to spend 2% of its GDP on its military spending, its military budget. Not exactly that NATO has a kitty and 2% of that kitty must come out of each individual
and be shared equally,
country.
Everyone's GDP.
There is a NATO budget,
right,
and that is funded by the European countries as well as by the US. And the US is the major contributor. In one wild moment, President Trump apparently mentioned a figure of 73% of the budget is met by the US. It's actually about 22%.
Right.
But it is a large amount, and previous presidents also have called for NATO countries to share more of the burden. At the summit, NATO summit in 2014, the countries agreed that they would, those that are not doing so, and it's correct that only 5 are doing so, would up their military spending, the military budget, up to 2% by 2024, which is something that Angela Merkel repeated in the press conference.
Right.
So the rejection from Germany of the subsequent tweet by the president of Germany owing vast sums of money is of course based on fact. Having said that, the US has some justification for demanding that the Europeans pick up a little more of the tab than they have been doing. After all, the security that is provided by NATO is to the entire Western alliance. And therefore, naturally, it has to be shared. And there is a case to be made out by the US that it is being somewhat unfairly shared. But how this will play out in subsequent discussions with other countries in NATO, with the US, we'll have to see. My personal opinion on what you said about overall US-German relations is no. The relationship is far too important for this to be damaged by certain perceptions of differences of opinion on a matter like this, important though it may be.
Right.
The overall relationship, I doubt, will be allowed to suffer. I think we will see the same pattern that we have seen in other cases vis-a-vis South Korea and Japan and China, where President Trump's hyperbolic statements will then be followed by some soothing statements and more sensible statements by his cabinet
sort of what
colleagues.
we've seen even with U.S. and China.
That's
you
right.
make these comments, they come out on Twitter, and there's sort of a little bit of a mitigation.
And then you see some, well thought out damage control.
Right.
I mean, I don't think that's policy, but that's the way things seem to be going.
All right, some comments from Glenn Carl with regards to this. Do we anticipate any more, some of the other NATO countries that may come in and step in, perhaps defending either the United States or Germany in this case with regards to Trump's comments? Glenn?
Well, I think most everybody in a position of authority is a rational adult, and so with one notable exception. So yes, we will hear from foreign ministers, defense ministers, prime ministers, leaders, and politicians in probably every member state statements affirming the importance of NATO, recognizing the obligation to meet the 2% of GDP spending in coming years. It is a long-standing, as my colleague alluded to, bone of contention between the United States and other NATO members that the United States, as the largest, most strong military member, has free riders. That is a frustration. This is an ongoing issue, but it's not solved by a unilateral, nationalistic and simplistic denunciation of allies who have a whole range of issues that they have to contend with too. So I think yes, we'll have responsible adults making the right noises and moving to some extent in the right direction. And in any collective body, you never have complete harmony and full agreement. But that doesn't mean that you interpret it in a way that seems to be that foreign governments have to pay the United States for protection money. This isn't quite a New Jersey mafia racket yet.
All right, thank you, Glenn, so much for that update. Without a quick break here on Gravitas, we're going to continue the conversation on the other side about U.S. and China's relationship after U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson ended up meeting up in China. That discussion right on the other side. Stay with us here on Gravitas.